Today on the Bar Business Podcast, discover why 73% of bars completely or partially pivot their concept within the first 18 months of opening, and how to avoid becoming another statistic by using simple metrics that reveal when your vision and market is misaligned. Learn the strategic flexibility framework that helps you identify which elements of your vision are non-negotiable versus adaptable and allows you to create a bridge between your dreams and market demands. And master the grassroots market research methods that don't require big budgets, along with a 90-day testing approach to evolve your concept without alienating your existing clientele. Hello, and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. So today we're diving into something that, quite frankly, is really important in the industry. And that is your ability to pivot, your ability to change your concept to adapt to market realities. Now, there are a few cases where this comes into play. And the obvious one is when you first open, right? Those first 18 months, usually you're coming in with a concept. You have an idea of what's going to work in your market, and you're going to execute that. Now, sometimes what your idea is and where your market is are not 100% aligned. That happens all the time. But you can also end up in the same situation with after you're open and it's been years and you've developed out some time, that you get in a position where your market's changed around you, right? So you can come to market with the wrong concept, but also you can have the right concept for your market, and then the market changes around you. And think about this. I mean, there's not a neighborhood in the world that hasn't had its ups and downs over the course of years. So especially if we're talking about let's say a pub in the UK that's been there for 500 years, well, what people want today and what people wanted 500 years ago when they opened, probably not the same thing. So we have to pivot when we start out, because a lot of times we're going to have assumptions we make when we're planning our concept, when we're building our vision, that prove to not be true in the real world. But we also have to be ready to pivot when the market changes around us, when people's expectations change, when our neighborhood changes. And with neighborhood changes, it could even be our demographics changing. Now, the thing to always remember, though, because we're going to talk a lot about how to adjust your vision, but you have a vision for a reason. You've put your heart into your bar, your soul into your bar, a lot of times your life savings into your bar. And so because you have this vision, because you're so set, it can become very painful to have to pivot. But the thing is, if it's business, right? And I have said this before, and I will say this again, no one gives a shit what you like. And that's true. What you like in the bar industry does not matter. What your customers like does. So we have to understand our customers and move to them if we want to stay in business. Now, far be it for me to say that if you had millions of dollars and you just wanted to have a bar that was exactly what you wanted and you didn't care whether or not you made money, yeah, do whatever you want. That is great. And I'm very happy for you if you're in that position. But for most of us, we have to turn a profit to keep ourselves alive, to put food on the table, to support our families. So being able to pivot, being able to adjust to your market is absolutely crucial. And what we want to do, and what we're really going to get into it towards the end of this episode, is you have to be able to balance, here's my vision, here's what I want, and here's what the market's telling me, and walk that narrow path in between the two, where you're very happy with your concept. It's the type of bar you want to run. You enjoy being in your establishment, but at the same time, your establishment is hitting the market in the best way possible. So let's talk through the conflicts that arise and why this is an issue, particularly when you're opening. So when we look at concept pivot rates across industries, bars, we're looking at about a 73% rate within 18 months. That is huge compared to other industries. And when I'm talking about pivots, just to be clear here, when we're talking those first 18 months of operation, some of those are going to be cosmetic, right? You realize the walls should be covered in wood paneling because of the type of old English style pub you are, to continue to use that as an example. But you didn't have wood on the wall, so you put wood on the wall. So that's a cosmetic change, right? And that will greatly impact your atmosphere and everything else. But a lot of the pivots we're going to talk about, it's not the cosmetic. It's business model. It's target market. And because when we pivot business model and target market, that's going to have an impact on our core offerings. We're really talking about everything in the business. You need to be willing to pivot and to think through, is this the best way to serve my guests or not? Now, as I mentioned a minute ago, the hard part of this is we have to manage the pivot to our guests, to making money with the vision you had and not having that vision. And quite frankly, if you get too far away from your vision, you're going to have resentment towards your bar. You're going to give up in the business because it's just not fun for you anymore. Now, where this is really, really difficult, and this is something I see a lot because I deal with a lot of small town folk. Small towns always are going to present more of a unique challenge than a big city. If you're in the middle of New York City, I mean, with some exceptions, right? There are obviously some concepts that won't work, but there's enough people in New York City. As long as there are enough weird people that like the weird thing that your weird concept is based on, you can do whatever you want because you have millions of customers at your fingertips. If you're in the middle of Idaho, though, I mean, especially if you're not in Boise, you gotta adjust to what people around you want because there ain't that many of them. So in small towns, a lot of times what I see is people try to have a sophisticated vision, but that doesn't fit their market. Or they have a sophisticated vision that fits some of their market, but that market for that more sophisticated vision isn't a large enough market to keep them afloat. And then we have to talk about, okay, how can we make this more appealing to everyone else? Now, I think it should be pretty obvious, but to kind of quantify the pain here of not being aligned, you're going to have wasted inventory. You're going to have underutilized equipment. You're going to have employees that are not having a fun time at work, right? Because if your vision's not aligned with what your guests want, your employees are going to be torn between doing what they know the guest wants and doing what you're telling them to do. And you do not want to put your team in that position. One of the biggest mistakes, though, and I see this from time to time, when people think they can educate their market and, oh yeah, if I build it, they will come. People want this thing that doesn't exist. Well, that could be true. But to tell me that you're going to put a fine dining concept in a Coors Light town and that's going to work and be successful, I'm going to generally say no. Now, if you happen to live, say, in a rural area that's also a big tourist area, right? And particularly in this part of my mind, I'm thinking like Appalachia, because I kind of live in the northern extent of Appalachia. But you have relatively, and I don't mean this in a bad way when I say low rent, but you have relatively low rent people in that they don't have hugely expensive tastes. They tend to do well for themselves. They might have a bunch of money, but they don't have the expensive city tastes that come along with that. But you also have a lot of tourists. So you can put a really high-end concept sometimes in a tourist town, in a place like I live, where the locals are not fancy by any means, but the tourists kind of are. So you can make that work. But unless you have a lot of tourism, you have to serve the market around you, especially in a small town. And you can't just educate your market into liking something, right? It's really, really hard. I had a manager do this once, but it's really, really hard to turn your Bud Light drinker into a craft beer drinker if the guy's been drinking Bud Light for 20 years every day after work. It's possible. I've seen it done, but it's highly unlikely. And so if you think you're going to take a bunch of Bud Light drinkers and suddenly serve them craft beer, and you're going to educate the town on craft beer and how much better craft beer is than Bud Light, you might have a problem doing that, if I'm real honest. So understand your guests, understand your vision, and then find out how to align those. And remember, when we're talking about this, the core problem here is not having a vision. Having a vision is absolutely required. It's important. It's essential. Absolutely essential to have a successful bar, right? You need that vision to create a cohesive concept like we talk about all the time. But it is failing to test that vision against the market realities before you make the investment. That is what buries people and puts them in this position where they must pivot. So how do you know when it's time to pivot? Well, hey, guess what? And I'm going to give you the same answer I normally give you on things like this. You'll look at the data. You need a data-driven, reality-based understanding of your business to see where you need to pivot. So one of the best ways to look at, okay, what does my market actually like? Pull your PMIX. Look at your sales mix. If you realize, I have 50 craft beers, but I sell 10 craft beers a week, so I don't even sell one of each beer. I just sell 10 total, and then I sell 20 cases of Bud Light. Well, you probably have the wrong concept. So your sales mix is going to tell you a lot about who's coming in. You can also look at things like urbanicity, which is an Esri idea of what the location around you looks like, or just general demographics, psychographics of the area around you. But your sales mix, that's really telling you who's coming into your bar, what they enjoy, and then you can look for the patterns that exist in your sales mix. And then you can leverage those patterns and make small pivots towards where your customers are that are going to increase your sales and make your guests more happy. So one of the other things you can do to get this data is you can do what I call an 80-20 menu audit. So I think we all know the 80-20 rule, but essentially here, 20% of your menu items are going to generate 80% of your sales. That tends to be more or less true for every bar or restaurant on the planet. So what are those 20%? And what do they mean about your customer? What does that 20% reflect compared to the other 80% that is not generating as much profit for you? Another thing to look at within your POS data is to look at substitution requests. If you have some fancy thing and I don't know, you have some fancy fondant potatoes, which are not, fondant potatoes, they're great. They're not that fancy in the grand scheme of things, but they're far fancier than just like mashed potatoes. But if you have this fancy potato on your menu and everybody goes, yeah, you know what? I don't want the fancy potato. Just give me some mashed potatoes. Oh, right there. You're learning. Okay. They don't want the fancy. They just want mashed potatoes. That tells me something about my guest. That tells me where that line is. Now, conversely, maybe you have a meal that comes with something simple and everybody's paying a bunch of extra money to upgrade to the nicer thing. Well, that's going to tell you the opposite about your guests. So understand this can go both ways. I'm talking about this generally as we're going from a higher end to a lower end because that's what I see more in reality. But this can go both ways. You can just as likely, or just as easily, I should say, undergauge your market as overgauge your market. As you, though, are looking at your PMIX, at the substitutions, and all these little pieces of data, the real thing here is to tie that back to the demographics, tie that back to the urbanicity, tie that back to other metrics about your guests so we can understand them holistically. And when we know what sells and what doesn't, then we can take a look at our financials and look at metrics like cost of goods sold, labor cost percentage, and see, okay, where is my vision hurting my bottom line, where my guests disagree? Right? That's a really easy place to pivot when you go, oh, I thought this was important. Based on the data I have, my guests are telling me this isn't important. This costs me money. I shouldn't do that anymore. Pretty simple, logical process. But just even that process, because it requires a pivot, it requires you to have the humility to understand, okay, I had a vision, not really working as well as I thought it would, so I need to pivot. Without that humility, you're going to be out of business. But with it, you can really drive your business forward in a way that will make your team and your guests very happy. So I talked before about the strategic flexibility framework. I said we'd go over that. So I want to give this all to you, and this is really meant to be actionable. This is kind of step by step. And it's something that you could do this week, next week, do it over the course of a month. But it is a way to understand your vision, where you need to pivot, and how to pivot. So first step to this strategic flexibility framework that I want you to do is to conduct a core vision audit. Now that sounds really kind of weird, right? What is a core vision audit? Well, the idea here is we're going to identify the elements of your concept that are truly non-negotiable versus those that you can adapt. So when we're talking about a cohesive concept, right? Like say you're an Irish pub. Well, I would say probably having an Irish flag out front, non-negotiable. Probably it should feel like an Irish pub on the inside, not a nightclub. That's a non-negotiable. Probably you have Irish music playing in the background or some kind of alternative music that has an Irish bent to it or something, rather than goth hardcore music, right? So there are some non-negotiables there that are just obvious because you are an Irish pub. There are also going to be non-negotiables in your concept that are non-negotiables because, well, you're the owner and you said so. Now, we should be really careful when we lay those out because what we don't want to do is to establish a situation where your non-negotiables are what's holding you back and you've put in too many non-negotiables. But there can be some very simple non-negotiables. I don't want my employees to wear t-shirts. I want them to wear collared shirts. Okay, fine. Right? Now, I would not set a non-negotiable much stricter than that when it comes to uniform because, yeah, maybe we can do polo shirts. Maybe we can do Oxfords. We can do all sorts of different stuff in there. If you set it to, I will only allow, to bartend behind my bar, you must wear slacks, a shirt, a tie, and a vest. Okay, if you're some hipster place downtown somewhere that still has hipsters, great. That'll work for you. If you're not, that's just kind of a stupid rule that goes above and beyond, right? Where the non-negotiable could be, I always want to make sure my team presents themselves in a professional manner that elevates the experience of my guests. That's a much more better non-negotiable than saying, well, they have to wear slacks, a shirt, a vest, and a tie. And heck, at that point, you might as well write it into your dress code that they have to wear a fedora too. But you see my point there, I think. So once we have this list of true non-negotiables, then we need to look at, Why are these things non-negotiable? And essentially, I laid out the two reasons that you would put something non-negotiable, but everything on that non-negotiable list, you need to list as it or identify it, bucket it as either a vision element or a business element. So a vision element, that's things that matter to you. That's things you want, things you care about. Business elements are going to be what matters to profitability. So a non-negotiable business element could be everything needs to be rung in. Great. A non-negotiable vision element could be at night, when the sun goes down, I want the lighting to come down 20%. Right? Or you just go move the dimmer switch from the one witness mark down to the other witness mark. However you do that. But that's a vision element versus a business element. So identify those. Then, probably say this too much, but do some menu engineering. Look at what's popular and what sells well, what you're making money on. Understand that. And look at, do my high margin items correspond directly with my vision? Right? And again, just to use an Irish pub, because that's kind of what we've been playing with today as an example, I would think you'd sell a lot of shepherd's pie, a lot of fish and chips. Right? That's kind of what we would expect from a shepherd's pie. You're probably selling a lot of Guinness compared to other beers or Harp or Smittix. But if you tell me you're an Irish pub and I look at your menu engineering and I said, well, your most popular items that you have the best margin on are hamburgers, chicken wings, and tacos. And the beers that are the most popular and you have the best margins on are, Bud Light, Budweiser, and Molson. I'm going to go, there seems to be a disconnect here. You say you're an Irish pub, but you sell Bud Light and burgers. Versus, you say you're an Irish pub. When I look at your menu, you sell Guinness and fish and chips. So take a look at that menu matrix. Make sure that what you see that's selling off your menu corresponds with the vision that you have. So we're doing the vision audit. We're determining what's non-negotiable. We're then bucketing those as a vision element or a business element. And then we're bringing our menu mix, our menu engineering into play to see that those popular high margin items correspond with the vision and business elements. Now, if they don't, or if we want to change the offerings a little bit, or if there's something in the atmosphere of the bar that we want to adjust, we need to look at bridges. And we're going to talk about bridges a little bit more here in a second, but always think about bridge offerings. What are elements that you can introduce to push your offerings, to push yourself towards where you believe your market really is as you pivot? And this whole time, right, we should be gathering data to ensure that we're making a logical pivot as we go through this bridge. So think about the way this can go. Either we're going, regardless if we're going up market, down market, however, whatever change we're making, we're going in a direction, right? So we have our starting item, we have our bridge items, and then we have our final vision items. And that's how you need to think about this. Where am I today? Where do I want to be? What's in between today and where I want to be? And when we do this, we can set up vision window. Now, what is a vision window? Well, it's specific days when your full vision concept takes center stage. So how do you do this? Well, it sounds kind of crazy, but you could say, okay, I'm this kind of bar now, but I think I need to be this kind of bar. Well, maybe that vision window is you take a Thursday night and you run a bunch of specials that aren't like the menu you have, but like the menu you think you need to have and see what happens. Maybe you have a special that's on a different liquor or a different beer than you normally would because you think that's where you need to go. And so you can create these little windows that give you a view, not through the process of going from where we are to where we want to be, from the current state to the future state, but actually just jumping straight to a future state and testing it on your guests. And because in hospitality, especially in bars, we have so much ability to run specials, you can do this strategically in a way that's going to give you a lot of data and help you establish clear financial benchmarks for where your vision is to where you want to be, right? And help you understand, is this pivot going to work for me? Is it going to make me profitable? And is it going to provide the results that I really think it should? So once we have this idea, we've done this vision framework, right? And we've made it flexible. So we have our core vision. We've broken that into vision elements, business elements. We've looked at our product mix. We've looked at our menu engineering. We've said, this is what aligns. This is what doesn't. We've looked at bringing in bridge offerings, and we understand, at least at this point, what my current state is and what I think, again, we never know, but what we think our future state should be. So how do we go about doing this? Well, number one is, whenever you're pivoting a concept, people want to do something all the time when they buy a bar or they pivot a concept, which is they want to change it now. They want to come in and say, I'm going to snap my fingers and boom, I'm going to change everything all at once. Well, that's fine if you want to lose all your regulars. Because whether you're pivoting your existing business, you opened a business and you're pivoting it, or you just bought a bar from somebody else and you want to pivot the concept. If you change everything overnight, you're going to lose the business that you have because those regulars are now going to be coming into an experience that's not what they became a regular to experience. So when you're doing a pivot, yes, sometimes we want to do a drastic pivot. And if you want to do a drastic pivot, close down, redo everything, change the name, reopen. That's a drastic pivot. But if we want to pivot without doing that, we want to do it slowly over time. We don't want to pivot too much all at once. We want to make subtle changes. So gradual evolution becomes the answer. Now, generally speaking, depending on the amount that you want to pivot a concept, you're looking anywhere from 90 days for a small number of pivots to a year or two sometimes for a whole concept change that's done gradually in a way that almost people don't notice. So we want to do it gradually. That way we don't lose our regulars. We continue to build new regulars and it doesn't impact our business that much. Now, of course, anytime you're doing pivots, you will lose some people. I mean, I've done bars where we've pivoted and I've lost 25, 30% of the business. Now, I will tell you, every time I've lost 25, 30% of the business, that was an undesirable 25, 30%. And so given another 3 to 6 months, that business is now back with even better people and it's better than it ever has been. But sometimes your pivots are going to cut people out. The gradual approach stuff, that's going to minimize that to the extent possible. So the thing we want to do is plan out, okay, how long do I need here? And generally, I like to look at this as quarters. What steps can I take this quarter? What steps can I take next quarter? What steps can I take the quarter after that? What steps can I take the quarter after that? And even if you have an established bar, so even bars I ran that I own that were great, that were established, that we really didn't need to pivot that much, I still had pivots every quarter. We were still continuously improving. If you don't continuously improve, you die. So this implementing gradual evolution, if you need a big pivot, it's absolutely required. But even if you just are tweaking small little tweaks throughout the year and you're slowly building the bar and it's just normal course of business changes, look at it a quarterly basis. Whenever you approach something, right, look at one topic for the quarter. So it could be the lighting. It could be the decor in the bar. It could be your cocktail menu. It could be just pick one thing and work on it. And when we pick that one thing, we want to look at essentially 4 things. So if we're talking about lighting or cocktails or food, it's the same 4 items we want to look at when we're looking at gradual evolution. We want to take whatever it is we're doing and list out all the factors in that. So if it was lighting, it could be, fluorescent overhead lights, can lights, track lights, exterior lighting, pendant lights over the bar, table lights, whatever lights you have. If you were looking at lighting, you just list all the lights. And then what we want to do is we want to look at everything we have and say, okay, do I keep this? Do I improve this? Or do I remove this? So if lighting is the topic, we list everything about lighting. Keep, improve, remove. You're keeping it, improving it, removing it. Now, if you're keeping it, great. Nothing needed. If you're improving it, how are you improving it? What's the budget there? Can we figure out the ROI on that change? Usually we can't, but we can get some ideas. And if you want ways to do that, grab a strategy session with me. I'd be happy to help you out there. Remove, right? Is there something here that we just need to get rid of? And so once we have this idea of what are we keeping, what are we improving, what are we removing, then the question comes, what do we add? So every 90 days, look at a certain section of your business, whether you need to do a lot of pivots or not. If you're in a position where you need to do a whole bunch of pivots, probably should do more than one topic area. But regardless, you should always be doing one. Keep, improve, remove, figure that out, do those, then determine what you need to add, plan that all out. Now, throughout any gradual evolutionary process, throughout any change, and this is something that I see people get wrong in this industry all the freaking time, and that is you must understand change management matters. Change management matters. And where it really matters is your customers, bar customers, right? They tend to come in every day. They tend to be a little bit set in their ways. They like routine. Right. And when we think about bar regulars, a lot of those, especially like your happy hour folks, your afternoon folks, are probably men. Men don't like change, especially old men. And old men is who comes in the afternoon for a lot of bars. So what do? You have to communicate to them the changes and why. Give people the why. And so if you want your customers To get good answers when they ask questions, you have two choices. You can sit in your bar all day long and explain why you're changing things to them, or you can communicate it properly to your team so that your team can explain to your guests. So tell your team what the evolutionary journey you're on is. Tell them where you are and where you plan to go. Tell them here's where our current state, here's our future state, here's how we're going to bridge that. Give your team all the information, and then they and your guests will not be worried about change. They'll be looking forward to change. Remember, even though you're the boss, even though in theory, right, you can go, I own this bar, especially if you own it outright by yourself. You can do anything you freaking want to it, right? It's your bar. If you want to paint the walls green and red and make it Christmas 24/7, you can paint the walls green and red and make it Christmas 24/7. Probably ain't a great business decision, but you can do it. But just because you can do something without anyone's input or feedback or understanding doesn't mean you should. Staff training must be part of your evolution plan to ensure that you have them execute consistently, to ensure that you have their buy-in, and by your team then having the buy-in of your guests. So it is absolutely important that you always get buy-in from your team and your guests before you make changes. But remember, the big thing here on gradual evolution, anytime you do anything, what do I keep? What do I improve? What do I remove? That first, and then what do I add? Never start with what you add. Always start with how can I use what I already have? Gradual evolution. Don't break the bank. But with that, to wrap us up today, we've talked about finding that balance between what you think you want to do and what the market thinks you should do. We've talked about how this can create conflict, emotional challenges, financial challenges. And that's especially true for people that operate in smaller markets. We've talked through, though, hey, here's how you get some data-driven reality in your life. Here's how you identify these misalignments. Here's what you do to fix them. And here's how you do that gradually and intelligently. Finding this balance isn't about abandoning your vision or stubbornly sticking to it when you're failing. It's about finding the way to merge your vision and what your guests want to ensure that you're giving your guests an experience they want to come back for, that they want to be involved in, to put them in a position where they want to come in every day and give you their hard-earned money. Because if you don't have guests giving you money, if you're misaligned with your market, you're not going to last long. And this is a hard business when you're not making money. So find that balance. And if you're struggling to find that balance, shoot me an email. Let's talk. Let's come up with some ways to help you see where that balance is and to get the information you need from your guests to drive yourself in the right direction. That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.